gleam of yellow shone through the bridge girders. "Here he comes," yelled Douglas. "Boop, boop, beep, beep, boop, boop." The two engines whistled excitedly in welcome. "Beep, beep," replied Stepney, as with passengers and people waving and cheering, he puffed proudly through the junction on the last stage of his long journey.
Well, I think today might actually be one of the most requested videos I have ever gotten here on RJ's Trains. I've heard from you guys on Instagram, in the YouTube comment section, on Discord. I was expecting a plane to fly overhead for you guys to let me know that you really wanted me to talk about my newest model, an O gauge model of Stepney. So let's talk about that today on RJ's Trains. Make sure to use code RJTRAINS at trains.com for $10 off any order $50 or more. So for those of you guys who follow me on Instagram, you may or may not know that I actually spent about 3 weeks traveling across Western Europe this summer. In fact, I ended up actually taking different trains all the way from Sorrento, Italy, all the way to London in the United Kingdom. And it was an amazing once-in-a-lifetime trip, and I loved every second of it. I was actually planning on making a full video about my train travels, but after none of you guys watched the Bluebell Railway video, I decided it was better that I just focus on layout construction. So let's see a little montage here of my Europe trip. Brings us to how exactly I came into possession of this Stepney model. Now, one thing that I started doing recently when I traveled to a new country is I like buying a model train from a railroad from that country. So last summer I visited Montreal, Quebec in Canada, and I picked up a Canadian National flat car from a hobby store. Other examples is when I was in Munich, I picked up this OBB passenger car, which is HO scale, of course, because I rode on the same coach for my train between Salzburg, Austria, and Munich. And funny enough, I actually bought this at a train store in the Munich train station, München Hauptbahnhof. And I walk out, and on the platform right next to the store was this coach in real life. So I was able to get a picture of the two of them together. And another example, when I was in France, I picked up this SNCF covered wagon. Not really sure exactly what it is. But that leads us to my time in the United Kingdom. If you've watched the video on my visit to the Bluebell Railway, thank you. And if you haven't, make sure to go check it out, because you get to see a little bit of the magic behind this amazing locomotive. If you guys actually watched the video all the way through, which I know none of you all did, because then you all would have had known about Stepney 2 months ago. Yeah. So now the next thing you all are probably wondering, well, it's a 2-rail model. So how have we seen it running around on your 3-rail layout? How the heck did that all happen? And I have to thank my friend Sid from over at RJTRAINS because he is a wizard. So this engine came DCC ready. So that's it. It had DC control. It had the socket to install a DCC decoder, 2-rail wheels, 2-rail everything. Sid worked his magic. He installed a Blunami decoder, a speaker inside this tiny, tiny locomotive. I mean, you can see it compared to the Superliners here in the back. And he was able to install a flickering light inside the firebox, and he was able to install pickup rollers underneath the model, making this thing I don't want to say fully compatible, but compatible with 3-rail O scale. So I can run this alongside any of my other locomotives. And the greatest part about Blunami is that they actually have British sound. So this thing actually has a British whistle. Not accurate to Stepney, but it's close enough. The British whistle. Just to aggravate all of the British and rivet counters out there, let's hear the bell on Stepney. Very, very British. But one of the great parts about Blunami, and people like Optimus and RJTRAINS have done better videos on this, you can add any whistle instantly to the locomotive. So let's say I wanted a different whistle for Stepney. Let's say I wanted a PRR single chime Banshee whistle. Doesn't get more fun than that. Now, there are a couple things I need to point out about the operation of this locomotive because it is a 2-rail scale locomotive operating on 3 rails. It wasn't designed to do this. So you definitely need to have larger curves, and you have to be using either Atlas or Gargrave's track. Also, it doesn't like switches because the flanges are so small on the wheels. Going certain ways into switches causes both the locomotive and the cars to derail easily. And the locomotive is very light. This locomotive probably weighs less than your average MPC freight car, to put it into perspective. So operating in reverse, or probably anything more than these 3 coaches here, would give the locomotive trouble. But thankfully for me, I have a small, flat layout. This lower level has 1 switch. The upper level has no switches. So Stepney runs almost perfectly on my layout. And so the last thing to talk about with this train are the coaches. These are the LBSC Railway Stroudley coaches. Now, you guys might know these coaches as the basis for Annie and Clarabelle in the Thomas the Tank Engine series. These cars are the most beautifully decorated O-gauge passenger cars I have ever seen. And yeah, you see the Golden Gate Depot Superliners also right there before me. Just on the exterior, the paintwork to make it look like real mahogany wood, like the real ones. The decals are very crisp. All the pinstriping is just beautiful. And then you look at the interiors, great molded in details, the seats, the grab-on handrails. The only thing missing from these passenger cars are figures, and that can easily be rectified. Now you might be thinking, well, this RJ is a wacky consist. 2 brake coaches, which you can tell by the brake compartment that stands out, and just 1 random coach in the middle. And shockingly, in the early days that these Terriers were used, they had to have brake coaches on either end of the train because the locomotives themselves did not have brakes. They needed coaches to actually apply the brakes, and when they were running in push-pull configurations, they needed to have those brake compartments for the brakemen on either end. Only thing left to do, so let's run Stepney around the layout. How cool is that?